Welcome, guys. Denis, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to have both of you here, and I think there's some topics that we'll get into that I think are really interesting. Obviously, on the insurance side, and you know, from my perspective, and I talked about it in another episode, which is kind of funny. It's like I think sometimes you come from a place where insurance only serves like one purpose, which might be in case of. So, in case of a fire, in case of a theft. And I think a lot of people have a misrepresentation of um, how there's so much more to it. And I think, where I want to start is a little bit about how you guys operate. Like, what's in a nutshell the spectrum of insurances or the brokerage that you're working with on a day to day, I guess.
Well, you could segment that by different lines of products. So
Mm-hmm.
we do personal insurance, we do
Okay.
group personal insurance for associations.
Okay.
We have a small business team, a corporate commercial team, and a group benefits team.
Mm-hmm.
So in each one of those market segments, they're dealing with a different type of client, they're dealing with a different type of potentially product based on the unique needs of each one of those groups.
Okay. Good. And like for both of you on a day to day basis, which specific area would you say that you're more focused on?
So we're not a jack of all trades.
Okay.
Every individual that we have in our firms very specifically specialized in their department.
Okay.
So John does group benefits, investments, and as well as commercial.
Okay.
I specifically do commercial insurance. We have another department that does personal insurance, so home and auto.
Okay.
Then we have another department that does group and benefits, and they're tailored to that need. So if we diversify ourselves in too many departments,
Mm-hmm.
then we don't specialize in that one.
Right. Right.
Where commercial, that's all I'm focused on.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned before, so if we were working in that type of industry, then we can kind of speak that language with our customer
Yeah.
and tailor down the needs that they have, um, and make our recommendations based on what they do specifically.
Yeah.
So if I have 5 different plumbers, not one plumber does it the same as the other.
Right.
So I ask you a one-on-one question, tailored to you
Mm-hmm.
as this one business owner, and this other plumber could do it 100% different.
Right.
So
Right.
I'd rather stick to commercial and do that as best I can to better my customers' needs. Um, do the Q&A on what they need and tailor make their policy to them.
Right, right. So what do you see like I guess for and we were talking a little bit at the start like the small to medium businesses, especially maybe in the commercial world. What do you find is the most common thing that people are not aware of, or the most common thing that people come to see you guys first? Is there something specifically?
Yeah, I could comment on that. I
Yeah.
think it's the same as any other business. When you have an entrepreneur that grows and grows the business,
Yeah.
it's easy to overlook the needs of that business changing. It doesn't matter whether that's their legal counsel, their accounting, the complexity will
Yeah.
outpace sometimes the attention of the owner,
Right,
if
right,
that's
right.
fair.
Yeah.
So I think that their needs become more complicated more quickly than they might anticipate.
Okay.
And unless you have somebody that's spending time and attention with that client to make recommendations or to keep ahead of what they think they need themselves,
Right.
then they wind up with shortcomings in their insurance programs.
Right. Right.
Not unlike a lot of other things that small business owners have to do. And I think that the world as a small business owner is becoming more complicated, more difficult to manage, more time consuming.
Right.
And that's really what we see as an outdated program based on potentially a growing business that didn't have somebody paying attention to what those diversifying needs require.
Right. So say someone would come in today to your brokerage, would be consulting you guys, and let's take the example of the plumber, right? What are some of the first questions that you're kind of wondering for that business starter that's maybe because of your experience, you're so aware that these might be the first things that they might fall into. How does those conversations start?
I think it starts by really understanding what that individual's priorities are, how they run their business, what sections of the market they're into. And plumbing can be a pretty broad topic.
Yep.
Are you doing oil and gas?
Right.
Are you doing fuel tank installations,
Sprinklers.
Yeah.
sewer systems,
Yeah.
medical gas in some cases? Are you doing industrial? Is it commercial, residential?
Right.
Those are the sorts of questions that I would ask, and I know Denis would ask to understand what does your business do? And I think I would tell anybody, to be a good insurance broker, you have to understand our business. We have to be students of our business.
Right.
We have to be updated on all the changes on our side. But we're not very useful to a client unless we understand their business and how they operate it. So to me, it doesn't start with what we do and the way we do it. It starts with the client and their business, what they do and how they do it. And we have to have that understanding as a base to build on from there. And if we don't get that right, I think that's where clients aren't well served by our industry.
Right. Right.
I think we're all too often caught asking too many questions, and the clients ask us, "Why do you ask me too many questions?" If we don't, then we don't get all the particular details that we need.
Yeah. Yeah.
So insurance is not about what you told us; it's maybe trying to find out what you
Didn't
left
come-
unsaid,
Yeah.
and that's where it gets interesting. The more layers of the onions you peel back, the more truth comes out. But we're in the brokerage industry that we're kind of like the marriage counselors. So we're trying to find out which market that we can pair up with the customer in particular, based
Right.
on what kind of business they run.
Do you think like do you think they're trying to like what would they be scared of it, per se? Because I guess like it is interesting what you're saying there. It's like if you feel as though you're being nosy, it's like, well, realistically, we need to know all of these things, right?
Well, it's almost like a good lawyer. I
Yeah.
need to understand the
Yeah,
whole
yeah, yeah.
situation to help you make a good decision. And Denis makes a good point. It's not about being nosy. It's about understanding what you do, because a lot of clients, the number one thing that I hear from them when something doesn't go well is, I should have spent more time on that and I should have known it.
Right.
You run a hardware store.
Mhm.
It's not my job to know what all of these lights do or how they're all wired or what application.
Right.
It's my job to articulate to you what I'm going to use it for and to select somebody that's going to give me good advice.
Right. All right.
You know, that's what the profit is paid for. You're paying somebody to help you achieve an outcome.
Right.
And it's the same in our business. So I would disagree with any client. If they wanted to do that, they'd be an insurance broker. They wouldn't run an HVAC company or a civil construction company. They wouldn't try to learn our business.
Yeah.
But I think in that interaction over the years, perhaps our business, when you say, I could turn right around and ask you, if I said the word insurance broker, what comes to mind as the type of person that I'm describing?
I mean, for me, it would be someone that offers protection. That's the biggest thing that I've always looked at insurance, and I think it's also just like it. Yeah, I'm just so like I don't have very much knowledge in it, other than kind of the first example that I was giving, where it's like I think the misconception is one that I've fallen for, which is it's only there just in case of an emergency, right? And I think a lot of people look at it that way, and maybe don't even know what an emergency looks like unless it is a fire or it is a theft. Like there may be other emergencies or situations that you want to be safeguarded by, right? Like, and I think that's the awareness that you guys obviously want to create, and that in another sense, it's like I think a lot of people want to know that they don't know enough, right?
I agree with you, but I also don't think it's a product or a service that conjures excitement to go out and engage in it. So that's the interesting part of it all, is that I think that what I want to do with the client is establish trust, have them confident in what our capacity is so that they trust us to help those make those decisions rather than be a vendor or a salesperson. That's the relationship I would aspire to have with any client, very similar to the one they have with their legal counsel
Right.
or their accountant.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's such a different business from that perspective, or why you wouldn't think you would get more than protection for a distinctive event.
Right.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, so insurance is not a tangible product,
Right.
so it's hard to see what you're buying. So
Yeah.
more and more nowadays is that what you're buying is a service.
Yeah.
And service is much more important these days than ever.
agree.
So why we ask so many questions upon the Q&A with our clients is not to disclose and to make them feel uncomfortable to disclose more information, but for us to better mitigate the risks that are potentially going to happen. So you don't know what's going to happen until it does happen. So we're trying to be proactive.
Yeah.
And before that potential loss or claim happens, we can help you to better your situation before something might happen.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Well, and as that evolves too, as businesses change, I think where we get involved are places that the average client may not anticipate.
Right.
As an example, helping them make decisions around buying and selling a business.
Okay.
We become very involved in what are the risks of buying a business? Is that insured properly? What are the solutions to mitigate damages if they didn't have proper insurance, or there's claims or issues that I'm now buying as part of that purchase?
Okay.
So you're really working as a team member with counsel and with accountants and other financial professionals to give that client good advice, not to encourage or discourage or limit or alter, but to help them make informed choices. And we have a perspective and services that we can offer to that client to help them do that. And I don't think a lot of clients would think of an insurance broker in that type of role.
I wouldn't think either. Yeah. Have you ever been in situations where it's been very difficult to assess the risk in purchasing a business, or is that information stuff that is very transparent? Like, how does that work?
Yes, absolutely. It depends on the business.
Okay.
Professional services businesses are one.
Okay.
That can be very difficult to understand what the past risk was or how well protected future risk is.
Yeah.
But you can get interesting conversations with clients around, well, how are you buying this business?
Right.
Are you buying the operating company? Is it an asset sale?
Okay.
If you're buying the operating company, you can't define what those previous risks were. Can we get counsel involved? Maybe you don't want to buy it in that way. Maybe you want to do an asset purchase to limit risk. Maybe there's other insurance products that we can recommend to purchase that fund some of the risk associated with that purchase.
Okay. Interesting. So I guess like the more I'm listening to you guys, it's more than just insurance. There's a lot of consulting that's involved in the whole process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You bridge that gap between what an international corporation has for resources and what a small growing business starts to need.
Right.
So you guys here at Home Hardware would have trucks on the road.
Yep.
How many trucks would you have here?
We probably anywhere between 50 to 75, I would say. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
It's a good size, mid-sized trucking fleet in the city of Moncton.
Yeah.
If your business grew to have 200 trucks,
Mhm.
probably the management of those drivers and trucks would become more complicated.
100%. And even like in the past few years, as the company has grown and we've acquired other stores, it's become more apparent that some of these roles that previously didn't exist, that would often be to the responsibility of maybe the driver or that store specifically, it's become apparent that you need positions like a fleet manager or you need a truck mechanic, those things there, which are just the maintenance and the preventative measures that need to be in place in order for a fleet that big not to stop operating. Because for us, a fleet that big requires that our trucks are always on the road, and any day that they're not on the road is a day where we lose revenue, right, and downtime. And when you get to that size, it's like, a lot more people rely on you, which causes a lot of friction when you do have that downtime, and we try to minimize that, right?
Well, I think you got all these carryover issues too.
Yeah.
So if a driver, it's not the accident that can be the ultimate issue. It can be an employment practices issue. If I didn't have the right screening for that driver, now I've got a hiring and firing decision that may be costly or not possible because I just didn't have the right information up front.
Mm-hmm.
So, aligning the insurer's interest and your interest as a client is a pretty critical part of the role.
Right.
Not fighting things that insurers can provide you as resources to help manage that risk, which ultimately are designed to reduce claims frequency and cost.
Right.
Rather than having a combative relationship, broker's job is to find that alignment of interest and work with the client and a capable insurer and select one that is going to help a client like yourself that's growing an auto fleet like that obtain resources to do exactly that.
Yeah.
Fleet management.
Yeah.
Large companies that have thousands of trucks on the road would have a full-time job for that.
Right. Right.
Very quickly, a client like you is going to hit a point where you don't need a full-time person, but now you're starting to enter into a territory where a lot of those practices or a lot of those management techniques are going to be required.
Okay.
So if we leverage those relationships correctly, there's some value that you can extract other than an insurance policy that's going to give you resources as a client that may not cost you anything additionally.
From the broker.
And the insurer too.
Right. Okay. So what do those things look like in let's say you'd have like a really big fleet? What kind of support do you offer?
Recommendations on fleet management. Fleet
Okay.
management's all about making you as a client defendable. Do you have a maintenance policy? Is it written?
Okay.
Do you follow it?
Okay.
What's your driver hiring procedure?
Okay.
Do you have a driver training program? Do you have, and these are not, they sound big, but they don't have to be overly complicated. Some of the best consultants I've dealt with on that side, on the insurer side, say these things have to be practical and something that can be easily implemented, and you chip away at it.
Yeah. And so those are services that you offer, or just would you be the person writing them, or how would that work?
Bit of both.
Okay.
So we have experience in these areas to use a client to say, hey, this is what insurers are going to ask you to do. These are things, so we can be proactive and understand best practices and help you either implement or understand them, or be subject to reactive issues from the carrier that's going to come in and do a survey.
Right.
So it's a little bit of both. But on the carrier side, some of them have ex-truckers that ran trucks that are the fleet safety consultants that are very credible.
Right.
So you can bring them in with no cost to help design a fleet maintenance program. So it's a combination of my experience or our experience and leveraging the right people at the insurance carrier that can come in and provide those resources complementary to a client.
Interesting. So I guess what would you say to, and I don't know if this is a scenario that you face a lot or that you faced in some occasion, is like a business owner being like, well, it's my business. Like, how do you know more about my business than I do when you're making those recommendations? Because I feel like if you are offering a lot of these recommendations or services, and some friction comes from the situations where you're asking a lot of questions, but you're getting a little bit of pushback on that. Like, how do you navigate through situations like that?
I'd rather ask more questions than assume.
Yeah.
Insurance, you should never assume that you're going to be okay or covered.
Right.
You should always ask more questions and ask the questions to the markets that we deal with. We just relay the information that we've taken from the client and bring it to the market and discuss that on the side note, and then come back and go back to the client and say, okay, based on our discussion with the market, this is what they're asking for. We can play with their requests, their conditions, their requirements. Can we adapt your way of running your business to accommodate their needs, mitigate the risk? But no one has the same business as the others.
Right.
So how you're running your business, we can tell the story to them. If they're not the market for it, as a broker, we can go to another market and discuss that same conversation. Maybe they're going to allow the way you run your business to fit the way they want to write the policy.
Okay.
And then we can kind of accommodate by changing the wordings a bit. And I guess kind of negotiate at the table as a broker and not just say like, this is our market as an agent.
Right.
writing directly your policy saying, this is what we have. We want you to run it this way. As a broker, we can go to different markets and say, like, look, this is how John runs his business.
Yeah.
Are you okay with it? No, let's go to the other market.
Okay.
Well, I think there's a big difference between dictatorial and being collaborative too.
Right.
If you have trust and you can be collaborative, it winds up not being the insurer pushing on a client or a client pushing on the insurer.
Okay.
It winds up being, hey, we have a problem on the table. Can everybody draw on their experience to solve that problem in a way that's productive for everybody?
Right.
So, to give you an example, in the residential construction space, when you have wood frame buildings, application of heat is a problem.
Right.
They're generally, if there's a loss, they're significant.
Yeah. For sure.
So by questioning roofing technology in certain circumstances, we've been able to get the client to find a cold applied roofing membrane that wound up doing what they needed. It accommodated risk on the insurer side, and we were able to get a better solution for everybody, including the client.
Okay,
but if you don't have trust with that client,
right.
they're not going to understand what the purpose of you asking the question is. But if you don't have trust with the insurer, they're not going to collaborate the same way.
It's funny, like I didn't ever think of situations like that, and where we often see similarities in that, and it's not even to the same extent, is like we often have specific builders that even if you would recommend a product that does something better, that achieves something more efficiently, that reduces the amount of time that it takes to build or whatnot, they might not just take it because I'm just used to doing it this way. And I feel like that might be some of the situations that you get into. But how do you convince someone to change their ways that they've been doing for so long?
I think that again starts with trust. Do you think I'm giving you that advice to serve my own purpose, or am I doing it genuinely?
Yeah.
And you take that position, and we're not here to influence or steer somebody to do anything. It's just presenting information. Hey, let me help you evaluate that decision. You can do it this way.
Right.
And that's what that means, or you can do it this way.
Right.
And I'm not attached to either outcome. I just want you to understand as a client and just have a little bit of input one way or the other on and sometimes it takes somebody else. So I'll give you another example. Helping a client decide, should I build my building out of wood frame or concrete?
Right.
The idea is that you can build one quicker and get it to market faster.
Fair, yeah.
There's other people that they should talk to that help them calculate that financial case. Does this or this make sense?
Okay.
What's the market cap on it? What's the resale value on it? Where does it put you? Here's what I can give you as a client. I can tell you this information. Yeah. I can project for you 10 years worth of insurance costing or the implications around what insurers are going to want on the project.
Right.
But I should also tell you, hey, you should take that information to your other advisors. Don't rely on me to help you decide that. That's not something that should be decided by an insurance broker.
Right.
But what I could give you may be pieces or data points that you can take to the other people that give you advice, and then you can make a more complete decision.
Fair. That's a good.
We can help you with a short-term plan or a long-term goal.
Yeah.
Everything varies depending on what you want to do.
Yeah.
Do you want to save money now, or do you want to save money down the road?
Yeah.
Do you want to have better options down the road? We can offer you a suggestion, recommendations, what you do with knowledge that we give you. It's up to you at the end of the day.
Well, I'd phrase that almost a little differently. My goal is to put the client in a position of understanding their options and making an informed decision. And then they have confidence in what that decision is versus what you said at the start of the conversation, kind of uncertainty.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. What do you see, like in being in the construction insurance side of things? What do you see that a lot of people often overlook or try to cut corners on? Like,
it's an interesting question. Not necessarily. I think that we also, as part of the business community or part of that client's advisor network, we have to understand what's driving people.
Okay.
It's too simplistic, I think, to say that somebody wants to have it cheap or cut a corner. I think that we have to be attuned to the very real pressure on margins, inflation, everything else. So I think part of what we're trying to do is help that client understand a value proposition. Does this add value or not?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not understanding their project, if you're not meeting them at their level,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't demonstrate competency, it's very hard to be considered in that sphere of people that are speaking to that client.
Mm-hmm.
So the part of that I think that there's a miss on is not understanding that client's perspective. What are you trying to achieve
Right.
here? And then let me talk to what's your priority on this project.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to save money. Well, I should be able to hear that as an
Yeah.
advisor and give that client solutions on how they can do that, but also give them information they need to hear and make sure that they're protected in a way that they understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have a part of the business, like I like how you were talking about services in at the start of this conversation, and we have a part of our business that is fairly new, that is more service focused, that, I think for a lot of people, it's like if I buy a product, I have a physical product with me, and it's much easier to quantify that purchase because I can look at, like, okay, well, if I buy a Yeti mug versus another mug, like, there's a certain value to this, and I can, this being $30 versus that $20, but this, it does this, and that, like, that makes a little bit more sense. But when you look at something like a service, it's like you're trying to often make it so that the initial investment is one where the returns aren't visible at first, but in the long run cause, and for the service that we have, like ours is primarily focused on project management and design services. It's like we're trying to extract a vision from your head and put it in real life, and we're trying to do it in the most efficient way possible so that you don't waste time trying to explain those ideas or manage your own project. But there's a cost to it, and it's a service, and for some people it's like it's difficult again to quantify that. And I feel the situation that you both are put in on a day-to-day basis is probably very similar.
I think it is, and you can actually kind of quantify that.
Yeah.
So kind of playing on exactly what you're talking about. If I'm coming in to buy a light here from you,
Mm-hmm.
what am I really trying to buy from you?
So I'll weigh in on this one.
Yeah.
So more and more now we're getting automated services instead of a cashier or someone helping you
Yeah.
out through the store. So if
Yeah.
I buy a piece of lumber or I
Yeah.
buy a Yeti mug or I buy something that's comparable to a knockoff brand, I'm
Mhm.
asking you based on what you bought. You sourced out all these materials. You sourced out all these other vendors. Why did you choose Yeti?
Mhm.
I want my experience from inside your store to outside the store, not to end up at a cashier automated system to buy it myself. I want your advice to tell me what I should buy based on your experience.
Yeah.
Instead of me just walking out the door. That's what I'm buying.
Yeah.
Is your service. That's why I'm coming in your store.
But I'm also
yeah.
buying one other thing.
Yeah.
All products, if you have them long enough or you buy enough of them, will have a problem. I'm also buying a service from someone that's going to help me resolve that
Yeah.
problem with that product. And to quantify that, because you can quantify it.
Mm-hmm.
If I go, as Denise says, and buy it with no help,
Mm-hmm.
and I buy the wrong light over my table,
Yeah.
what's my cost of that mistake?
You could end up wiring something wrong. You could end up having something that the voltage is maybe too high, or what. Like, there's a lot of factors that could play into that.
Or I just don't like it.
And you don't like it. Yeah.
My
That's
cost
true.
of that is quantifiable. I have to take the light down.
Yeah.
I have to resell it.
Yeah.
I have to go back and get another one.
Yeah.
So that cost between having the right advice, maybe I spent 10% more on that light, but it's the right application.
Yeah.
I can now measure that cost on what that mistake cost me because I didn't have any advice around it.
Yeah.
So my question when I'm coming into a place like this, I'm not buying the light, I'm buying the service for somebody to tell me what to put
100%.
there.
Yeah.
And they're very different transactions.
Yeah, and we had John McNair from Outdoor Elements in Sussex, which was kind of explaining the same situation there, where it's like, when you come to my store, the first thing that I try to do is not show you the bikes that I have, but figure out what's the one bike in my store that's exactly for your needs. And that's what you should be going to a local store or store of my specialization. You should be going exactly for that. And there's that's why you pay a little bit more than the Amazon, or you pay a little bit more than the big box stores, because what you get from me is years of experience riding and product testing and all that stuff, and it's a part of the price, right? And so I think sometimes it gets undervalued, right? When we're looking, coming back to the cutting corners thing, I think a lot of people would cut that corner first, be like, well, screw this person's advice, like maybe I know better than him or whatever, I don't need to
I
pay
read it
for
on
that,
Google.
right? Yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah.
on the East Coast, we still have that feel that we want to be personable,
Right.
and we still have that age group where we want to walk into a store and talk shop and
Yeah.
get to know the person that we're buying from,
Mm-hmm.
and have that local feel. That's something unique, I think, on the East Coast versus other big cities.
Yeah.
But you also want to know who you're buying from,
Yeah.
and it's still local. I find in the insurance industry, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when the nationals are buying out the local small brokerages that used to be independent,
Mm-hmm.
it's starting to feel like a do-it-yourself shop.
Okay. Right.
So we still have that independent feel where you pick up the phone, you're talking to us directly.
Right.
Well, and just standing behind what you do the same way
Yeah.
that we do.
Yeah.
I find there's two guiding principles that I've always said to everybody that works with us and the clients. Two kind of golden rules.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only going to recommend insurance products to you that we would buy ourselves, because
Okay.
we're a private business.
Yeah.
And we're going to spend your money like it's our money.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Very simple things, but pretty powerful way of holding yourself to a higher standard in the services that you offer.
I think a lot of people often, are skeptical of that first principle that you mentioned, though. I find that's become something that a lot of people these days, and I think, part of it is, social media and the internet, all of what we're exposed to now, but also in these kind of echo chambers of what we believe, is that, if someone has a differing opinion from the beliefs that I may have, I'm not going to believe that person that has that differing opinion, right? So when it comes to, situations where someone might come in and you're making these recommendations, their skepticism might just come up because it's just against their beliefs, right? Is that something you see on a day-to-day basis, or?
Yeah, but I believe if you're in the industry of insurance, you have a natural need to be in, it questions your integrity.
Yeah.
You want to naturally want to help someone.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
human
yeah.
nature, but to
Yeah.
be in insurance, you naturally want to help someone to better themselves.
Mm-hmm.
If I give you the wrong recommendations, I would feel horrible if
Yeah.
something happened to you and I
Yeah.
gave you that recommendation. And then you would turn around and come to me and say, this is your fault.
Mm-hmm.
And in a small town, on the East Coast in Moncton, you would tell everyone.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen to me.
Yeah. The word would go by pretty quick here.
Yeah. So what I offer you as a recommendation, I would purchase it myself.
Mhm.
I wouldn't recommend it unless I would purchase it myself.
Mm-hmm. 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 I'm really curious where your beginnings were in terms of in your careers, if you've been in insurance this whole time, or if it started somewhere else, and how much has that shaped you? And the reason why I'm saying that is a lot of what I've done in past experiences or first jobs have been something that I think a lot of people should do, and it's working in retail. And I think that's an experience that it shapes you, not based on the specific skills that you gain from it, but just the nature of people and being on the receiving end of trying to do something very basic, but seeing how sometimes there's a lot of complexities in human interaction. So I'm really curious, because being in insurance, I think on a day-to-day basis, you're trying to help people every single day, but how do you get there? What's motivated you to be there?
Mine was a pretty straightforward path. I
Yeah.
went to university and studied finance,
Okay.
and wound up in this business directly at a university. So
Yeah.
I finished my last exam on a Saturday and started on Wednesday.
No way.
And that was 18 years ago. So I've never done anything else other than jobs in university, which were typical jobs
Yeah.
back then of
Yeah.
construction, retail,
Okay.
hospitality.
Yeah.
And I think you're right on what you said, though. All those jobs set you up
Yeah.
to understand or appreciate very basic interactions with people.
Yeah.
And a lot of those companies that run those types of jobs have very good training programs
They do.
that are
Yeah.
undervalued.
Yeah. That's totally true. What about you, Denis?
Going out of high school, like I said, I traveled Canada quite a bit. Part of a youth program, Katimavik, and then I came back here and took heavy equipment operator.
Okay.
So I was running heavy equipment in the construction field for a few years. Had the East Coast dream of going out west. Decided to stay here. Worked a variety of jobs, but got to see how businesses were run in different variety of industries.
Yeah.
Anywheres from retail to restaurant, hospitality, construction, and then fell into sales around like 2008-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Got into marketing, worked for the newspaper, which no longer is, I guess, really a thing, and got into sales. But it was through relatives that got me into the insurance industry.
Okay.
They said that this would be a perfect fit. It's all based on relationship, really asking more questions, being curious about how people run their business.
Yeah.
And just becoming a natural consultant, asking more questions.
Yeah.
You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Ask more questions. Listen twice as much as you speak.
I love that.
So here I am, and this is the longest career that I've ever had, and sticking to it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. The more I like, the more that I get to know the insurance world, and they're very new to having these types of conversation. It seems like a lot of the, I mean, hopefully I don't get calls from a bunch of salespeople after this, but I feel like the honest, natural salesman seems to navigate towards that industry, because I feel like the point you were making just before, it's like, you can't really sell the bullshit of like that protection or that recommendation, because it's going to bite you in the ass, and it's going to bite you big time, more than other places or more than other industries where, if I tell you this Yeti cup's going to keep your water good for 7 days and does it for 6, like nobody died, right? And I feel you guys, it's like you are probably making recommendations on a day-to-day basis that could very well impact someone.
You could sum it up very easily.
Yeah.
That policy or that legal contract that we're brokering is if something goes wrong, it's the only thing standing between you and keeping everything you have, or it's the only thing standing between you and losing everything you have.
Yeah.
And I think you have to really look at what we do with that sort of respect for it.
Right.
And that gives you that guiding principle, as Denis said at the start, of making certain that you're competent to provide that advice. And if you're not, making sure that your firm is, or that somebody is. Mm-hmm. It's taking it seriously as a profession in the financial services industry, rather than a sales and products role. So you're on point exactly with what you said, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Do you, I guess I was just kind of thinking that, do you still remember the first client that you got in insurance?
Yeah. I do.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about him.
My first client was an equipment dealer.
Okay. And do you still have an are they still with you guys, or?
Still with me.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, the first one I got as an individual, I've kept most of the clients I started out with, I've kept the whole way through.
Wow. That's awesome.
Well, you build those personal relationships with people, and I think when you can do something that adds value to them and that you can feel good about as an individual, not to sound too fluffy about it, but
no.
When you believe that what you're doing actually adds value to people's businesses, then you can feel good about what you do, and it becomes rewarding to do as a career.
Yeah. You remember?
Yeah, I'd be like an independent well driller, geothermal, HVAC contractor that had worked in the industry for another contractor for years. And he was going on his own for his family-owned business for himself. And it was a challenge to get him up and set up. And I remember I was on my a family trip down to Halifax, and I
Yeah.
was helping them on my way there. And I was taking time while we settled into the hotel. I said, I got to take this call and help him get set up.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like, he's very cooperative, did everything that he could to give me the information. There's no like holding back on any information.
That's
The
sweet.
Q&A section where
Yeah.
you don't want to disclose too much, but
Yeah.
he's very open. And we helped him set up and solved his not a problem, but we
Yeah.
solved his
Covered.
situation where he needed insurance.
Yeah.
And then on Monday, this was a Friday, so on Monday he got set up. Very appreciative. Still to this day, I think he was the only client that actually bought me a Yeti mug, and the only gift that I ever had at Christmas. Not to do any promotions, but
Yeah.
and it was gratifying, like really
Yeah,
gratifying,
yeah.
and that's what feels good. Like it and still to this day, we still keep in touch, and we're moving along pretty happily.
That's sweet. I
So
love
when
that.
you help a family-owned business and he's got kids,
Yeah.
just a young family,
Yeah.
that's what feels good at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Saying I made this happen.
Yeah. Now, in terms of like, and I'll kind of start this conversation off with maybe my own personal experience more recently. Like, my car insurance and home insurance went up like so much this year, and like for me, that's like I have no relationship to TD Insurance, and I have no relationship to Sonnet. Like, there wasn't like sitting down with you guys. It's like automated questionnaire online, fill it out, like, and then that's the insurance policy that I got. And for me, cost was obviously the first barrier, or the first situation where I'm like, okay, I need to shop around and figure out if there's something cheaper there. In your situation with clients, is price something that often comes up? Like, is there
Always.
others? Yeah.
Always. And the cost of inflation has gone so high that, I mean, and taxes and everything, that
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's food on your table that you're trying to help your customers provide their families.
Yeah.
I think it's gone more to the point that it's a do-it-yourself system.
Yeah.
Especially, so you mentioned Sonnet, it's owned by another larger insurance
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
So that's what you need a broker for, is to do that work for you. You don't
For
have
sure,
time
right.
out of your day. You're running a store, you're
Yeah.
running staff, like the trucks that you said, that's time consuming in the run of a day.
Yeah.
You don't have time to call all these insurance companies to do that work for you. That's what you call a broker, to do that and source out that that price point, and
Right.
hopefully at the end of the day save you without, I guess, compromising your coverage.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that you understand what you're buying and
Mhm.
bring value to that.
Mhm.
And then at the end, if we can save you some money, bonus.
Right.
I think a good advisor, I think you have to take that requirement of your profession very seriously, and people
Yeah.
may not understand their own needs.
Right.
We just ask you a really simple question about your personal insurance. Do you ever travel to the U.S.?
Yes.
Do you ever rent cars down there?
Yeah.
What's your limit of liability?
No idea.
Say it was $2 million Canadian. Are you comfortable that that's enough in a serious accident in the United States with the exchange rate?
True, eh? Yeah.
If I was to tell you a personal umbrella costs less than $300 in some cases to have an extra $3 million.
Okay.
So client comes in, they may be concerned about price,
Right.
but it's just like going into any other type of professional. It should be incumbent upon you to say, look, I hear and understand you're concerned about pricing, and we're going to address that.
Right.
But there's also some things that you don't have to take any of my recommendations,
Right.
but I'm obliged to walk you through what those
Things
look like
different.
and help you understand that. So we've certainly had clients in the end of sometimes spent more money than they spent before, but they understood the value, or they got the value
Yeah.
out of what they were getting, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We have some clients that haven't followed those recommendations and have saved money, and that's okay too. What we're trying to do is put a client in a position where they understand what the risk is, what their options are,
Yeah.
and make a decision that's best for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what you said too, like just earlier, which is the case for most people, and I'm obviously guilty of it, is you don't have enough time to do that research on your own, and you often leave like really gaping holes in your policies that cause insufferable damage in the long run if something does happen, right? Like we had a couple of guys that were on, they were talking more about the life insurance and personal life insurance, and I met with them like outside of the podcast, and they were just kind of looking at, our group policy for insurance, and they were like, oh, there's really good for short term, but long term, like you got jack shit, dude. Like you're screwed. Like if you are off for a year, 2 years, something happened that's really serious. Like this is your income right now. This is your expenses. Like you need to be here to cover it, and you got zero, right? And I think a lot of people, like, they're just, they get group insurance at work, and they're like, well, I'll be good. That's it. Right?
Well, especially for a business owner that, every time you buy a business, what's one thing that you have to have if you increase your debt load or your line of credit? Life insurance.
Right.
There are things over your lifetime that can make it so you can't qualify for it.
Okay.
So a good life insurance broker should ask you, it's more, as Denis said, it's more about understanding what you're going to do to give that right advice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to continue to scale up my business. Well, I don't want to charge you a lot for your life insurance, but maybe we should get that now and get a limit that's going to tolerate what you're going to be asked to carry, so that we can make certain that you can have it and that you're not medically underwritten and disqualified later.
Yeah.
I think it's our role too to understand who our clients are.
Yeah.
So when I was 19, I couldn't give two shits about I paid for insurance for my car.
Yeah.
As long as I saved as much money, give me PLPD. I don't want physical damage.
Yeah.
But now that I have a family and kids, that's much more important to me.
Yeah.
So you understand where they're at in their life and what's important to them. Ask more questions than you need to better understand the situation. Then you can offer better recommendations and present it to them and say, I'm not you. You tell me what you want and how you feel about it, but here's your options.
Right.
And make it not forceful.
Yeah.
But I think everybody that thinks the sales is they're going to be coerced or baited or influenced.
Yeah. That's,
and there's this great expression that people don't like to be sold. They like to be put in a position to buy.
Yeah.
And I get the feeling from the way you run your business and the way that you talk that that's what you're trying to do too. I'm trying to show you options and have you make the decision.
100%.
And that's comfortable for people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like, I've personally never considered myself a like pure salesperson, but along the years when you spend time, being from the sales associate all the way up to maybe managing or directing or whatnot, you start understanding like it's not so much about telling someone specific things like buzzwords or specific features or stuff like that. It's really more about listening and then making recommendations based on the things that they tell you. And then also, like, as you grow with experiences, you start being able to do those things more efficiently, in the sense where you can kind of fill in the gaps with the information that they've given you because you've seen a lot of those scenarios, but also you're able to ask those follow-up questions that get the little pieces of information that might not be so apparent, or that they might not want to divulge that easily, right? I find often what we get with on the project management and interior design side with our design center is people don't want to talk about their budget. Like, what's your budget for the project? Well, yeah. And they don't want to tell you. And we're like, well, you kind of need to tell us. And so you need to figure out, like, okay, well, can we figure out, like, what's their target spending range? Can we figure out, like, present them with specific items that they can start and pick and choose? Or can we present them with certain concept that we know, well, this one's going to cost a little bit more money, this one costs less money, which one do you like? And from there, you kind of can start guiding them towards a selection that makes as much sense in their head as it does in their wallet, right?
Well, there's a good expression too. The cheapest suit you ever buy will be the most expensive suit you ever own. So asking those good questions, even if it was like a heat pump.
Yeah.
How long are you going to own this house for? How big is it? What temperature range do you require?
Yeah.
And then what's your budget? And I can probably tell you as a consultant on that purchase, I understand this is more, but it's going to last the length of time that you're going to own the house, or it's going to have X amount of maintenance. So maybe that bigger upfront cost is more cost effective in the long run. You're going to be more satisfied.
Right.
But unless I have that trust from you as a customer, then awfully hard to give that advice. And if I genuinely want you to leave and be satisfied with what you bought, I need that information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what would you say, like, for someone that, maybe inexperienced, because I feel like both of you, Denis, you've had a lot of experience in, being on the ground floor in people's positions as well, right? Which is really cool, because I think that helps you understand their lingo and connect with them from the get-go, right? But for someone that, might be the person coming out of university, or going into their first sale job or stuff, like, what are some things that they can take away from your experience and say, like, how do I, because you talk a lot about the trust part, it's like, how do you build that trust? Like, what's a piece of advice did you give on that end of things to help build that trust?
I think you have to genuinely want that person to have the right outcome for them,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to give them value.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it all starts.
Mm-hmm.
There's two ways to be motivated, I think, in a cliche sales world, where I'm doing this for me and I'm going to get from you what I want,
Yep.
or I'm doing this for you and I'm going to make certain that you get what you need and want, and then you're going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you build a career and a reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't fake that, and you can't
Right.
alter that motivation. So you're either motivated to help people and have them make the best decisions for them, whether it negatively influences or impacts you or not,
Mm-hmm.
or you're in it to try and optimize that interaction for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So if you focus on the first part, my advice, learn everything that you can, be competent, be professional, and make certain that the client wins.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it kind of follows.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think if you give advice and someone takes your advice and you find them that they come out as a winner,
Yeah.
and you have no monetary value, but you get that gratification in the end.
Yeah.
So you know what? Based on my recommendations, buy this couch versus that couch because I know all the ins and outs, the material, how it was built, where it was built, the longevity of it, the quality of it. And then it lasts you 10 years, you're happy. You're going to come and say, hey, Den, like, thanks for giving me this recommendations. I love this couch. It's lasted us forever.
Yeah.
It didn't fall apart like the other one from X amount, XYZ store.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had no monetary value. I don't get any rewards except for seeing you happy.
Right.
I think that's the most gratifying part of being into our position, is saying that you're a winner and I win by making you happy.
Right. Right.
And hopefully you spread the word to the other friends and take my recommendations. But that's what I get out of it at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Well, it was an absolute pleasure, guys. I think that while a lot of people can sometimes be reluctant at first to get insurance, I think that it's more than just the insurance part. I think there's also a part of what I've grown to know just in this conversation here. It's like you guys are there to support the business and make sure that the business survives any challenge, right? And I think that that's something that people they fail to understand at first, but I think you guys are probably the best ones to go see if they're looking for those recommendations there. So
We appreciate the opportunity to come in and chat and be part of the podcast.
yeah.
Yeah, likewise.
Awesome.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, guys. Awesome.